I did. First sledging name, then fiend.
I didn't look this time. I didn't think you did it right.
And then
What?
I'm gonna beat you
I was
to
gonna
it.
say you know the
Yeah.
So I
found a-
cannot
found a
show up
new-
on
I
Thursday?
found a new way where I don't have to claim polls.
Really?
Well, in September, when I set up those Zoom meeting recurring and so on, you define some parameters. One of them was recording the polls.
Okay.
And I couldn't record if I was on polls, so
Yeah,
I was doing it all the time, but it's the way you get to it.
I'm sorry.
If in the event.
Yeah, this is
you're
true.
in a session and you want to participate, you're not. So that's how we link to the bottom line. And now I go straight into the course. So you're gonna watch what you're saying.
Great. I mean, that
Well,
means
plus
I am fine. Everybody else, yeah.
No.
Oh, that's a funny story.
Good morning, people. Feels like we're ready. I know it's a little early. We're being late. I don't know. Something's happening. I'm getting good at it. Wow. I think everything's good. So, folks, we're moving on with wildlife management. You all know the particular setting for this year. We're looking at how we move the course as we go. Material is pretty good, pretty high quality. The difference in the final exam will be the level of questions. So at the midterm, I warned out the audience to the way I present my exam. Questions were fairly general, just a set of basics. Now, it might do the nitty-gritty at some point. So expect some questions that are sort of core, but that find their language into some of the areas. You know, like for example, everybody will talk on Saturday at home and say, "Oh yeah, habitat loss." Yeah, well, you know, then again, so there is to develop on that. And again, general biology is always in the background for every species. We know that. So because it's about fitness, it's about survival and reproduction in a given context. In this course, it's always about human interface, what kind of impact we have, positive and negative, on the species, what we want to have on it, so an action that we take after realizing there is an interface that we interact with that species, whether it's red fox on the campus, too many, too few, and so on. So the biology behind it is always important. That's why there's 4-year programs, because you learn the basic biology of the species. Keep that in mind anyway. We're all modest, so I'd have to look into the koala. It's a marsupial to see gestation length and so on. Okay, basic biology parameters that lead to one measure, one primary measure, which is abundance. Like that at the final exam for sure. So that's the key element. Realizing, making sure you know how many. Can you predict how many there will be? That's life tables and so on, based on the biology of reproduction, reproductive biology of those species. Whether it's a plant, whether it's ginseng or other species, mostly for animals. So that's why it's a big undertaking, I'm going to say, to become a wildlife manager, because suddenly you're supposed to get the tools in order to construct a management plan for a given species. Do we know the numbers? First meeting, do we have the real numbers on the animal? Is that real? Is that interface really real? What kind of perception does the public have? All right. So that's my warm up. I think I'm going to, after I retire, I'm going to become cheerleader. So without further ado, let's see if that works. Did you see that?
The only question I have is there's no one participating, so I don't know what happened there.
Yeah, not very popular today, eh?
No, No, because I have a feeling if you went through a different way, then the people might not be on the same link. I'm not sure.
Participated in something else. I hope it's a history class. No, it's being recorded. There's not much I can do, but I'm not gonna have two platforms, so I'm not gonna open the other session.
Okay.
It's hard to, I could always invite them, but you're right. I agree. I'll communicate with them. at some point. Sure. We'll send a general message to the class, whoever was connected, but the course is being recorded. So that's put it this way, better than nothing. We're almost done with this this chapter here. We're gonna move on. This is where we were. We finished with gopher tortoise, if you recall. This is about fire management, so they call them prescribed burns. This is a good term to bring in the exam for the regular stuff you will see all over the planet, other than Indonesia or elsewhere. So, of course, in the background, somebody's worried about those big tortoises. So that's exactly what the topic is all about, and it's publishable because it has been published. So, in other words, significant. You all know that the value here is the tortoise itself. We're looking at a long-lived animal, so losing an 80-year-old animal is really, human perspective, it's really costly, very expensive. You can replace a minnow a little faster, a little easier. So there's additional value to the tortoise right here. So the experiment was pretty simple. It was comparative. So looking at two different responsive tortoises to two different areas. So after the burns, I mean, I think the bottom line is that tortoise prefer not to have burns at all. That's a good control site. But between the two, it's what's left behind. That's what I take from this paper, is that after a prescribed burn, not everything burns. Raise your hand if you know anything about fires. We're going to be talking about habitat. We'll talk about fires. Anybody is a firefighter here? All raise your hands. Victoria? No. Cindy? No. Yella? You knew your name was coming up. A? Yeah. Anybody? So fire is lit. Yeah, that's funny. There are, of course, the basics. I'm going to give you this orally right here. Fire is, of course, from natural sources or anthropogenic, correct? So that's a reality. There's so many, and we use fire all the time. We wouldn't be here if it wasn't for fire, correct? Look at some old movies. Quest for Fire, anybody? That's a vintage movie now. About Neanderthal looking at two tribes, one of them found fire, so they got an advantage over the other. So natural or anthropogenic, so of course you all know that. We're sort of familiar, this is not Ontario, we have to be familiar with fire just because there is a natural regime behind it. So everybody says, oh, it's not the fire village, destroyed or evacuated. Always costly, but half of them are natural causes. Causes, anybody quickly? What causes and what's the natural cause for fire? Natural source. I can think of two elements. Yeah.
Lightning,
Lightning for sure. And what else do you need?
bad environment, really dry, really hot.
Beautiful, you got it. So that's a combination. It's pretty simple, but there's a season for fires when it's dry. Dry is July because it evaporates more. You all know that, right? So it's pretty basic. So Northern Ontario catches on fire at least 100 different locations in every summer. Did I say summer? Yes, because I've seen some of my bad field buddies who, in the winter on snow trails, like to fire up some white birch. But the forest will never catch on fire because it's snow and it's wet everywhere, so there's absolutely no risk for fire. Okay, so we know there's natural and anthropogenic. Now, I just wanted to mention that there's intensity. So intensity is really important. Oh, might as well add the wind to it. No, I don't think the wind has anything. But anyway, so for example, a wind will give you a larger fire, so will influence the area. So the more wind, the more area covered by the fire, for sure. That's simple. But keep in mind that it might create a lower intensity fire. In other words, the line of fire is traveling fast so that the rest of it doesn't burn entirely. So you can grade a fire by its intensity. All right, so keep that in mind. A surface fire, for example, would be intensity 1. And then 4 is when you have soil that smolders a month later. You come back and these guys have to firefighters have to go back because they know the fire is still in the ground. There's carbon, it's burning. It's like coal, right? All right, so that's very important. So this one, obviously, the prescribed burns, I think that's what the word prescribed means. It means it's controlled, right? So in other words, the intensity will never reach a certain level. In other words, it's a mild intensity. Let's put it this way. In other words, it might leave some stuff behind, and the brush is left behind in some area. And that's what happens in this story. So that was a bit of a break, talking about tortoise to Ontario fire. Wow. Talk about being all over the place. I just couldn't help it. So in this second to last year, we're looking at Johnson 2019 effect of grassland management all over wintering bird communities. So right away in the paper, the title, I see overwintering question mark. Why overwintering question for the exam? The answer is probably. And there's nothing like if I really want to know, I'll read through the whole paper. The intro should tell me why overwintering. Any idea why? Oh yeah, I remember that's when I had coffee. Michaela's got the answer for us.
Is it because,
No, she doesn't know.
is it because if they're overwintering, they're likely not migrating?
That's a good one. So residency is certainly a point. So overwintering meaning they didn't come here for the harsh winter, so they probably, as you say, probably resident. So added value to prairie, right? This is what we're talking about, open habitats. So obviously you're looking at the, let's go fancy. What do you call an assemblage of species that has the same function in the environment? For example, bunch of carnivores in the forest. There's a word that starts with a G. It's 5 letters, and we can play hangman, and that defines a group, a subgroup. You got a community, right? You got plants and animals. That's right. Within animals, you have, say, herbivores and carnivores. So the carnivores are a cohort, a group, a fragment, a portion of that community, correct? And they're defined because they have a common function, which is predation, for example, right? The word is guile, guiled, G-U-I-L-D, guiled. Am I pronouncing this right, or is it guild? Guild, eh? Sorry. Yeah, that's the German in me. Yeah. Guild of carnivores, guild of, for example, forage species, species that are meant to be eaten by predators, minnows, for example, or Nemo. Yeah. So, so that's important right here. So instead of wasting time in looking at summer when all kinds of birds are abusing the prairies, they want to know what I'm going to call a grassland obligate. Here's a fancy term as well, grassland obligate. Of course, it could be a forest obligate, it could be, right? So we're talking grassland obligate species. In other words, we assume, the biologists assume that species will not survive without us. So that's a very fine thing to do. You clear the area of all the species who cannot tolerate grassland conditions during winter, they don't belong. They're just visitors, tourists during the summer. So that's a nice thing to do. So of course, question at the exam, why break it down into the overwintering? Is it because, yeah, you got more time for the field? And in this case right here, I think the bottom line, if I don't, I'm not mistaken, let's look at the, it says also successional scrub, everybody's comfortable with that. So we're talking shrub. Shrub is typically woody plants in the shrub layer, which is 1 to 3 meters. So you're looking at from here to the ceiling, you're looking at shrub or alder, for example. And the measure, the response is the species richness, and right here they have, they identified, let me see, native grasses, non-native. I don't know the definition of warm season versus cool season. I'll ask a botanist in the next 5 years, I'll find out. And then these are managed at different time of the year. So bottom line is species will respond better to no management whatsoever. So management does have an effect on these species. And it says at the second to last line right here, sorry, I'll show something here. Second, sorry for the small print. Species richness is influenced by management timing. So in other words, that if you have to manage that grassland, do it. You cannot expect your recovery before another year, for example. So the timing is important. And of course, the last yellow highlighted right here, unmanaged areas exhibited higher species richness. I hope the concept of richness is simple enough, straightforward enough for you guys. Is it simply occurs presence absence of different species? We're not looking at population abundances at all, but just composition of the yield during winter. Not the most exciting, but still, this is publishable material just in case you return to Saskatchewan and want to do something on Saturday. Resnick et al. 2018. Looking at island fox and spatial ecology and implication for management of, must say something. Can't even read my own.
Management of disease.
With that,
It's management of disease.
oh,
Disease.
on disease. Huh. And I had to hide that word.
Yes,
Okay,
you
it's
did.
pretty key. It's pretty key. So right now, we're doing wildlife management. So management's about, okay, we get a problem, an issue, an interface. The interface right here is disease. Use the word epidemiology. This is a broad field of any kind of species that tends to propagate a pathogen. Pathogen is a good general word. Could be bacteria, viral, of course. Be mold, fungus, all kinds of anything that's so this is a very bad map of this island right here. A bunch of islands, I believe, because it says right here that 4 to 6 island fox subspecies being listed as endangered. So I'll just until further notice, if you have a species on an island, you're prohibited from calling it just a red fox. So you have to, in this case, it's been called a group of island foxes, Eurocine littoralis, right here. Littoralis, yeah. It's on the shoreline somewhere. Notice that it's not the same genus as the red fox. Of course, disease outbreaks. So disease predation, genetic isolation are important. That's key for this paper. So disease within the foxes, predation and genetic isolation are 3 causes. So they were looking at the spread, and to them, the spread is about movement. So the paper is about monitoring the movements of foxes across and looking at different features in the landscape that could enhance the movement of foxes. You don't want to enhance the movement of foxes, you want to let them stay put. And bottom line is, I think foxes, you see that at the bottom. And of course, I encourage you to read this again before the final for other little details. I don't think I'm going to go too much geography. So San Clemente Island, no. Material. Right here it says that foxes, I'm at the second last point. Foxes living near roads move 33% farther. This is no surprise. That's an easy peasy. If you put roads, you create corridors. So write it down as a corridor. We keep thinking of road as in road kills and road mortality. It's only half corridor. Adam, Mr. Cal. Tell that to your supervisor at the park. And maybe the roads are helping some species. Creating a corridor. That's what happens with those foxes right here. So, of course, because you publish in Journal of Wildlife Management, the editor will force you to come up with some management plan of some sort, some applied consideration. And they recommend, of course, increasing the width of vaccination firewalls and make sure they cross the road. So the way they operate, they budget, of course, every year. So, okay, we got so many doses. They spread them every month or something, and they create a line. So some kind of barrier where they try to catch as many foxes as possible through bait, and luring the animals into the vaccine. They cannot vaccinate them all. So they have to create barriers. The idea is to find out where to put them. And of course, right here, this paper says, don't waste your time anywhere else but across roads. So your barrier you are more likely to intercept carriers across different populations. All right. So pretty simple. Notice right here, that grabbed my attention right here. Home ranges and core areas were 73 to 78% larger for foxes near roads. So again, because they have a road to move around. It goes with distance traveled. Everybody agrees. Home range proportional to distance travel. Yes. 2 different measurements just to confirm. So this is for this chapter 3 again. Share the next one right here. You're lucky the PowerPoint started huge. You're going to finish with 1 or 2 slides if we're lucky. So now we're going to focus definitely more for the rest of the semester, whatever is left of it. I counted like 7 course of 7 classes. I think. So number 7 is last day of classes. So there's plenty of material, depends how much time I have in 24 hours. All right, so I wanted to start and in the course outline, I'm trying to stick to that because that's sort of kind of a commitment. I was seeing 9 chapters, we're at chapter 4, so you can expect the other ones to be much shorter, so they're going to be focused on specific chapters, and I want to mention that specific chapters of Portrait et al. 2021, which is the textbook for this class. So I'm going to summarize probably the way I usually do a quick read through 300 pages, which is something that you might learn to do. Look at the pictures, just like in a comic book, you look at the pictures, then you read the text later on. So whatever attracts your attention there. So this is what I plan on doing until the end of the semester. So it'd be very useful for you to have the book at hand. Look at the picture on cardboard. It's, cut and paste from the manual and see where it fits in the book and what topic. All right, so we'll get back to that. For now, I just wanted to just make some kind of an introduction. This is terrible display for sure. Just to say that at some point somebody asked me to try to summarize habitat conservation in Canada because I was somewhere in, I think at the time I was in Spain. And all kinds of audiences. This was meant for reopen readers. They don't know a thing about Canada at all. Covered in forest, and that's it. So they wanted to hear more technical terms related to that. This is already not really outdated. I wouldn't say outdated, but it's pretty old. It's 20 years old and more. So of course, there's been updates on many of these initiatives. So the idea is to find out exactly what's been happening with Ontario, just to make sure that Canada, at least a portion, in this case, it's Eastern Canada. So I had to look at Ontario, Quebec, New Brunswick, Nova Scotia, and so on. Of course, most of the wildlife management or habitat conservation is documented for Ontario and Quebec because there's more researchers, more universities. How many universities in Ontario, anybody? I'm going to say 25, to say the least. So you're looking at a bunch of researchers on habitat. New Brunswick's got 3-4 universities. So of course the manpower is not there to document just as well. So, what do we want to take out for the final exam right here? Of course, right here, Historical Alliance for Life was an initiative. It's political, of course. It's Ontario who established this program, Alliance for Life, back in the day. And then, never mind the public hearings, not that interested. Of course, everybody wants to know if the public has been involved. We know that. So at that time, one of the big thrusts in understanding habitat relationship with wildlife is to try to structure the habitat. We don't have it easy. The desert is simpler. The Arctic is simpler. The forest is not simple. We have seasonality. I mean, some forests have 2 seasons. We have 4. So it's not simple at all. So here you're gonna bring back here the idea of trying to structure it through and finding a pointer right here. This is just an example of classification. So the keyword here is classification of habitats. And that becomes really practical. Really, you have to look at some technicians will go over Landsat day in, day out for months on end just to try to make parcels, give them a name, an ID number, and this boiled down to, in this case, look at this right here, 22 ecosystem sites. 22 ecosystem. That gives you the order of magnitude. If you plan on studying habitat in Northern Ontario, you might be looking at 22 different ecosystem sites. In other words, different, different from one another. I'm not going to give you the background behind because I've never made a key like that, but basically you go out in the field and it used to be on paper and now it's probably on a pad somewhere and you're looking at Labrador teeth check and so on. So you're looking at species, basic species, looking at water level, soil quality. You put all that together, it's called ecosystem, correct? So please write this down so the parameters with it, just because I just mentioned it. So complex key, that includes observations on certainly herbaceous plants. So plant cover is a good answer to that. Plant cover. Certainly soil and water. Soil and water. So soil, okay, you get pretty first on soil, but it's not simple either. We're lucky for non-Ontario, you can expect the soil to be all spoil soil. Still, we have it through it. The soil is heterogeneous. The bedrock, that's just shallow, for example. All right. So all that combined gave 22 ecosystem sites. Now, that's a nice way from a botanist point of view. And then suddenly I look at the guy like me who likes to see how Martin prefers the 22 ecosystem sites. I'm thinking what Michaela would say, bullshit, but she didn't say it. Never said it. So it's called grain. Write it down. So grain size. In other words, how specific you want to be in your classification. If you have 100 sites, you're finer grain than if you have 2 sites. For example, oak plant versus no plant. Right? So to me, that was too much of a fine grain. So we came up at some point with a study somewhere, and we'll get back to that at some point just to see if that meant anything for Martin. So of course, we're adding to the information. Somebody, some botanist, somebody called paleontologist said, listen, I really see 22 different assemblages, ecosystem sites based on plant cover, soil, and water, for example, which I'm thinking. And plant cover included trees, of course. When you say black spruce, wool, suddenly it's a dominant, right? All right. So we put that together. We'll see what that's all about. All right. So you see, I boiled it down to very little, I hope. Just a reminder on ecosystems, just to look at the breadth. When we say habitats, it's a bit kind of worms. Which habitat are you looking at? Very different, right? So of course, for the exam, you can expect a question like this. I mean, there's a variety of ecosystems. We've seen 8 in the past. Can you name 4? That's an easy one. That's an easy one. Now, this is very, I'm going to say coarse grain as opposed to fine grains. This is very coarse grain. I mean, the ocean, there's all kinds of components within the ocean. You know that. The ocean's got a structure. So do the lakes. The shoreline is different from the inside. So it gets a little tricky. But at that scale, that's good enough. Clearly, I hope assemblages that are mutually exclusive to some degree, So, I mean, from a human perspective, it's easy to make a distinction. Minor prairie or forest, that goes well. Lakes, running water, oceans, wetlands. By the way, there's no particular order here. All right, so that's just an idea. So I took the same ecosystems and looked quickly if I had myself to come up with features that make them different from one another, you want to open a discussion on the prairies. This is what I'd say. I'd say, well, first of all, it's on two-dimensional. I think I mentioned that in the class. Did I use this expression before? Two-dimensional? No, mixed up with the courses. Meaning there's no height. So 2D means 2 dimensions, no height, or depth for a lake, for example, right? So definitely herb cover. If you have a shrub only, you left the prairies, you're not into grassland, right? So you need the dominance of herbaceous. When I say herb, I mean herbaceous species, correct? Fire has to be part of it. This is apparently a dominant feature because otherwise you would lose your grassland. So that's what happens to grassland, whether it's natural or anthropogenic, of course. And then plains meaning the drainage. So typically, plain is a geographic term to designate a low slope. All right, so of course I went very superficial with these features, and keep in mind that soon enough, we're going to be talking animals that respond to these features. So forest is 3D. Major feature, the height of the forest impressive to humans. You climb the next tall tree, give it a try. So we're fascinated by animals that can use the vertical stand. So the 3D is a main feature. Lignin is important because that gives you the structure. So there wouldn't be trees without lignin. Lignin is your protein that gives you a stem. It must be solid enough that you can burn it. Okay. Yeah, we'll treat that. The cover is quite, the cover is a feature. I mean, typically every time you mention forest is because an animal is fleeing an open area to a closed area. So next to cover, you could write down closed habitat. Closed from light, closed from sight. The sound is muffled, and so on. All right, so. That's a main feature for sure. And it says strata, I think is part of, yeah, well, the cover, you can subdivide the forest into different layers, correct? So the next two strata, write down 3 of them. So the herbaceous, herbaceous stratum, which is at the ground, of course. Critical in a forest. Critical. Your forest cannot be complete without a herb. I call it herb stratum or herb layer. 0 to 1 meter on this height. And then 1 to 3 will be your. I think I'm talking to people who've seen and heard that before. So shrub is 1 to 3, and then your arborescent layer is on top. Some animals cannot do with a small, short forest. They're gone. They need at least 3 meters high, for example. All right. So that means, did I say habitat? When we're talking habitat, yes. So suddenly you see the importance of the 3D. There's room. Suddenly I have a volume to play with. I can play with height as well. So very high, medium high, or to the ground. So of course, more stories on that, and fire is also part of the natural regime in most forests that I know. Lakes are 3D. I mean, one feature is probably DOC. I hope you know this acronym. There's going to be acronyms at the final, so practice in your shower. So dissolved oxygen content. So I say, if you study a lake before studying the fishes or the amphibians, one of the first measures you're going to take with pH. So, and pH is not mandatory. Yep.
I always thought that DOC was dissolved organic carbon.
Yes.
Yeah.
What did I say?
Dissolved organic oxygen.
Oh, no, I said
Dissolved
I said
oxygen
dissolved
content.
oxygen
Or
content.
dissolved oxygen content.
Content, yeah. That's what I said, no?
That
Yeah.
is, we were taught that it was dissolved organic carbon.
Who said that?
Our aquatic ecology professor,
Who is?
that was
Dr.
Charles Rim.
Rantran.
Well, that's why.
He's not.
Charles,
Charles.
he said
It's
dissolved
dissolved
organic carbon?
carbon.
Wow,
Yeah.
well, that's fresh to me.
Oh.
Yeah, no, I mean, I have gone through a bachelor's too, you know, so I passed the course and it's a DOC, dissolved oxygen content. And we had the same in French, but refers to it, so. So
It's got
another,
two meanings.
another bet on a Diet Pepsi or something, you want to bet?
What? We're betting?
No, until we shake hands, which we can't do, so we can't bet during COVID. So we can't shake
I feel like it
hands.
just means both.
Could be both.
I think it's both because I know it means the other thing.
All right. So did you agree with my,
I mean, I don't think you're wrong.
okay, so.
Like, I'm not
my-
calling you
my-
wrong. I'm
okay,
just saying
all
that
right.
this is confusion.
Yes, thank you very much. Thank you very much, but no, I find it very interesting. Oh. Organic carbon
Yeah,
as opposed to inorganic carbon?
yeah, that is also.
What?
Yeah, there's,
CIC.
Oh, because it's part of a molecule. So your
Yeah.
carbon's embedded in an organic molecule of some
yeah.
sort. Oh, yeah, yeah, okay, yeah. Okay, just spend 45 minutes.
It's all
on that.
organic carbon. We got free for this one. What about-
Well, you're looking at two versions of the same faulty PowerPoint. You can't do that, no?
No, this is just
This is
Google.
Britannica.
And it says organic
Carbon.
carbon? Oh, okay, well, I hope I learned something. I'll look it up for sure.
Learn
Thanks.
something new
Thank
every
you very
day.
much. All right, so running waters, I say is linear. It's very common for animals to respond to the linearity. That means they travel up and down in one line along a running water. So if your water suddenly expands to the width, suddenly you don't have that movement. So the term running water is obviously, I'm gonna say, the fact that it's very limited to a river, for sure. Your mink, for example, your otters and so on, they all respond to that. Their home range becomes linear, so if you want to count mink, you say, I got a mink every kilometer. Of course, a river, one long river. So, and there's cheaters and narrow. We'll talk about that later on, trying to keep it as simple as possible. And of course, hydraulics is their main key, meaning adaptation to the running water, especially for fish. So that changes the whole scenario. That's a habitat for what we're looking for here soon is habitat specialist, or I said habitat obligate earlier for sparrows in the grassland. Because the rest is pure hell. An animal that, like the black bear, is very difficult to manage simply because it's, what's the word I'm looking for again? An animal that's everywhere. Let's go fancy. An animal you can find anywhere. I found a black bear at the tax station
Universal?
center. How?
Universal?
Close. Yeah, people keep coming on. Sorry. Yeah, cosmopolitan is more like it. Universal refers to the entire biosphere, so I wouldn't want to say that, but cosmopolitan means in every little city, and then ubiquitous is also a good term, you know, you can expect that animal. Yeah. Black bear swim lakes, you know. Let's see, prairies, yeah, lakes, rivers, yeah, they'll cross a river. No ocean, maybe not. And, wetlands for sure. Deserts, not so sure. Sunbreak, not so sure. So let's keep on going with this. So ocean is 3D definitely. I mean, because it's got a depth to it. This is of course fascinating. It's major. You all know of what you call the deepest point in the ocean? If it's in a trench somewhere, there's been movies on people trying to dive all the way down there. It starts with an A.
Hey,
Yeah.
I thought it was Mariana's.
Eh?
I thought it was Mariana's trench.
I thought so too.
Marianne?
Mariana's trench. I thought that was
Oh,
the
you're
one.
giving me the name of a trench? No, I'm thinking in general, if you're still looking at the deepest points in the ocean, whether it's a
Oh,
trench
it
or
was.
it's usually a trench, right? Which is where you're gonna have,
Oh, the trench is what threw me off. I was like, Mariana.
the trench is the cut in the ground. So I was thinking of abyss. Anybody? An abyss? Abyss. An abyss.
Okay.
And there's a movie called The Abyss. There you look it up. Pretty deep. That's where the Titanic was, so it took a while to find it. All right. So of course, I'm thinking of these depths because we're still sending robots now and we're discovering new forms of life. So obviously that vertical structure counts for something. Quickly, we're gonna say that the top part is the most productive for two reasons. First of all, you get a better chance of supporting an ecosystem because you have light. If you have light, you have plants. If you have plants, you have animals, herbivores, and then you have predators. I'm not giving you the technical terms on those habitats because that's too picky. The medium portion is made for migration. I'm going to keep it simple because it catches the main oceanic currents. So that's the middle portion for migration. Think of tuna, for example, as an animal that doesn't want to be at the surface, doesn't want to be deep in the ocean, stays right in the middle, and is a fantastic traveler. And the deep portion for highly specialized animals. Think of, well, I don't know if we have any, if it's even relevant for humans, because we have very little interface. Think of the octopus, maybe. Or, oh, yeah, deep diving. What's the issue? We're talking about life management, and what's the issue with species that go deep? Oh, here.
When you bring them back up, usually,
They explode.
not like, they don't like explode, but like if you look at pictures of the blobfish, like blobfish don't look like that when they're at the bottom of the ocean. They get all blobby like that when you bring them back up because the pressure is different.
Good one. In terms of wildlife management, what is it that we do at in the ocean floor? What is it that we're doing? I'm gonna say this 1,000 miles, yeah. Oil drilling is not bad, not a bad idea. That's really not very deep. So I'm thinking miles down. I think oil drilling is more, Gulf of Mexico, fairly shallow waters where you can, have your platform and all. So it's usually they call offshore drilling. What is it that we're doing deep and damaging some whales to it? Oh, let's go the other way around. What is the whale champion of deep diving? Yes, sperm whale. So the sperm whale was found because they had an issue with telecommunication. What is running in the ocean floor right now by the 1,000 miles? Yeah.
Is it like the sonar mapping?
No, just coaxial cable and fiber optic. So every day as we speak, every country, every strait in the world is trying to connect, say, Spain with Algeria. There are commercial boats right now that are just unrolling thousands of miles down in deep ocean. So you're talking leaving the continental shelf and then dropping down across the continent to the next side. So connector. And they found a sperm whale that was entangled. So they had a telecommunication problem. They found a sperm whale that was 3 miles down, entangled in those areas. So that's one habitat management. You want to know what animals you're impacting with that kind of procedure. I mean, it's the odd case, but still it exists, so. Wetlands, let's see what time we got here. We're good. Of course, saltwater, you all know that oceans make a big difference. Saltwater, an example of an effect of salt versus fresh water, anybody? Salt versus fresh water, what does it do to a plant or an animal? Yeah, dehydrates for sure. So that's called the water balance, you know, in your body. So every living thing needs a water balance. You cannot run a living thing at 10% water. It has to be, for example, I am right now, I'm probably dehydrated at 62. And I'll have some water balance, maybe 68. So the range is limited. We could add buoyancy, for example, buoyancy as well. In terms of fitness, for sure. Wetlands are too deep. There's no real depth to a wetland, yet there's too much depth for us. So wetland is just called impracticable. That means you cannot there's just nothing that you can use. Of course. Victoria is gonna say, my uncle's got a nargo. Raise your head if you know what the nargo is. Yeah, we'll do a lab on the nargo. So it's a 8-wheel vehicle that can float, go through, you know, bushes, rocks, and there. Yeah, if you like to repair flat tires. Yeah. So otherwise, marshes is always, wetlands have always been our issue. So all kinds of issues that we have for wetlands. I name a few for the exam. I'm gonna say smell, for example, decomposition, that's one. Insects, 2. Access, limited access. I'll have a beer, you go outside and say, oh, I dare you to walk 100 feet. And nobody wants to walk in cattails, for example. It's extremely difficult. So we're not made for wetland. So there's several components to wetland. It's impracticable. Otherwise, we all know that it supports a rich diversity of wildlife for sure. Deserts 2D, simple, it's dry for sure. I didn't say cold or hot, keep that in mind. Of course, we have cold deserts, right? So the Great Basin is a cold desert, so it freezes at night and gets back at 25 during the day in the winter. The Sahara will be a hot desert, but they all have in common to have very little precipitation. And deserts, I don't know too much of small deserts. I don't know about you, but deserts seem to be very big. I'd have to look into it, but I don't know. Someone walking in the bush and say, oh, look, a little desert. No. Right? Did it happen to you? No. Did you ever see a small desert somewhere? Oh, I just stepped over a desert. No. So, because it's based, of course, on water currents, right? Precipitation currents. Have you ever heard of rain shadows? Anybody? Rain shadows, that's what happens with the Rockies. The Rockies stops the water at the Pacific and the rest is left dry. Alberta dry, Saskatchewan is dry, the Midwest is dry. And Utah, well, tundra is too deep, pretty simple. Very few animals dig down because of permafrost, as you know. And of course, it's cold. I'm gonna go through a few of these slides right here. So, of course, if I have a long list, no, I shouldn't say that. I shouldn't say that. This is far from being complete. My idea was to leave you with the names of a few species that I'm going to call representative of a given ecosystem. You can call it habitat obligate, typical, feature species. So they all mean the same thing. So, in other words, examples, but I tried to pick So in the prairie is prairie dog. That came to me early. That's a good one. Good point on the exam. Whoop. Pronghorn. Because these are animals that stampede. I picked the pronghorn among other large herbivores. Notice that I didn't say moose, so and I don't want to go antelope or gazelle because they're all in savanna, so they need a bit of forest cover. So some animals really toast in the sun at midnight during noon. Bison is right there, of course. I didn't say, I don't think I said elk or anything like that. So really some species are really too herbaceous cover. I'm gonna say horse, might as well. So write it down. The horse is a good example. Finches, we've seen that already. Grassland obligate, and the prairie grouse is definitely an obligate. For different reasons, of course, sometimes the food source, the amount of lignin. For example, a bison prefers to chew on hay, then to go into grains, go into browsing into tree. In the zoo, the trees will remain untouched. And for the prairie grouse is there for a different reason. Anybody know the prairie grouse? Why does the prairie grouse like the prairie? What's in the prairie for a prairie grouse? It's another grouse. Hey, that's a good thing. No? Anybody? Anybody heard of prairie grouse? No? I don't think so. So prairie grouse is just, it looks like, yeah, I was gonna say it looks like a grouse, good one. Similar size, it happens to make displays for reproduction. So the term is called lex. So write it down, L-E-K. That's called the lek. And plurals with an S, L-E-K. And the lek is, I'm gonna put in bracket because this is not the topic here. It's like a harem pretty much, but it's a demonstration area that they make. So I got 12 males and they're attracted by males because they wanna, if you see 8 males in the prairie, you're flying over because there has to be a female, you will land there and you want to show that you're the absolute best. The female will reproduce only if there's a minimum, say, for example, 6 males around. One male, she says, who are you? Run, go away. I want comparison. I want to be able to shop around for a male. So these males will spend half a day displaying for the female, and eventually she will give way to what she thinks is the absolute best. This item that reaches a bit to your puffin topic there, you know, where the animal looks better, therefore I'm picking a better partner. It's by comparison. Same thing for the puffins. If I see only one beak, how do I know it's a bright color? I'm all looking at a run somewhere and say, oh yeah, the first one was much better. And hopefully it's an index of its fitness. So prairie grouse is for demonstration. I'm gonna say lek is the easiest answer to the exam. If you can remember that, it's because they make flex and they won't happen in the forest. Your rough grouse doesn't do that. There is no room. So someone is going to get stuck under a branch somewhere. In the forest, I mean, the list is very long. We said 3D, so obviously all kinds of layers have all kinds of species. So of course, mice plural, flying squirrels. Of course, this is very typical. You can understand that a flying squirrel in the prairie is not a good day. It has to fly. Same for porcupine. I mean, vertical stems, God, they like it. They love it. I'm going to finish with the lakes. So try to pick a fish that's typical of a lake. It's a little tough because they tend to move. Your salmon lives in Georgian Bay, so it's on Lake Huron, and then moves into rivers, so it changes habitat, tricky. We're not done with all the species that overlap different habitats. I mentioned that already with the black bear. So it's gonna be true for a whole bunch. What I'm looking for right now is a species that would belong strictly to a lake. You have any suggestions? I'm thinking lake trout. Got it. Nobody goes into a creek to look for a lake trout. It not only does it live in the lake, it breeds in the lake, so the eggs, they don't have to spawn up upstream. So lake trout is good for me, good for you. Whitefish, a bit of a cheater, and they'll very well run in the rivers as well, but really, if you want to find some whitefish, you will catch it in the lake, deep in the lake. And the lake is also deep, did I say deep? Yes. So that's a nice way of doing it. You're looking at a feature that's pretty unique in the freshwater, is the lake. The main feature that we eat has a depth, and therefore it has a 4-degree area year round. Your river doesn't. So therefore, some animals are lake obligate because they need that. Some people will call it hypolimnia, if you remember from ecology class. So that's the deep layer at 4 degrees centigrade. And I'm going to stop right here. Thank you very much.